How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. Hopefully just having a lovely day. Let's talk a little T. Higgins. T. Higgins, I'm gonna be honest. I've been all over the place with this guy. I was pro trade T. Higgins last year. Still looked like an excellent idea. I still like the idea of trading T. Higgins now if you franchise tag him and trade him. There's a lot of questions though. There's a lot of speculation. Is that a good idea? Is there a lot of trade value out there for T. Higgins in that situation? Do the Bengals just let this guy walk? And you really look into things, and there's, first of all, a couple roads you look down here for T. Higgins and franchise tag him. First of all, it depends what the Bengals are thinking. If the Bengals are thinking, let's sign Jamar Chase right now, and they potentially, front load this last year of his contract a little bit, you could save a lot of money in the long run. If you say, all right, Chase, we're going to give you 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 million more this year. I mean, we got 20 million in cap space. If T. Higgins ain't staying on, you're going to spend 5, 10 million this year, and then we can spread that out across the board down the road. If you're not thinking that, well then, all right, all of a sudden, giving T. Higgins a franchise tag is an excellent idea. And here's why. Because even if you don't trade him, you're going to have Jamar Chase getting paid next year. You can expect Jamar Chase 25, 30 million a year. And you have to figure that into your cap, into your finances in the future. Bengals right now is sitting with a lot of cap space, over 60 million entering this offseason. And if you're thinking about the Bengals, you think about the future, the odds of getting a free agent and saying, here's 1 million, 1 year, 20 million, the odds of doing that, very, very slim. Guys want longevity. Guys want a longer term deal. I mean, yeah, sure, you could probably sign a tight end. They could probably try a tight end game again 1 year, 8 million or something like that. But the odds of getting somebody on a longer term deal, a good player, a caliber of T. Higgins for that kind of contract, very slim. So you might as well say, hey, we're going to have that 20 million left over where you spent it because, at the end of the day, we have to save that 20 million for the year after that for Jamar Chase, the year after that for Jamar Chase, the year after that for Jamar Chase. So it's kind of the perfect scenario where you say, hey, we have kind of like 1 year of layover where we can plug and play one good player for 1 year. It's all we can really afford to pay him. And he's going to walk out the door. And T. Higgins fits that bill perfectly. And from that perspective, you say, hey, you know what? The T. Higgins franchise tag's not a bad idea because at the end of the day here, hey, it'd be excellent to give him the non-exclusive. Let another team offer sheet this guy. Let him offer sheet it. You get a couple picks out of it in return, some good picks. If they don't want to offer sheet it, which probably won't happen, you entertain some trade offers. And we entertain those trade offers, say, all right, let's talk. What do you want to give us? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to let T. Higgins walk for nothing. And I think that's the big thing here. And if you're the Bengals, you say, do we want to keep him? You're kind of 50-50. You wouldn't be upset. He's kind of a situation like you wouldn't be mad if he was on your team next year. You'd like to trade him. If you could, get something out of him. That's the situation. You don't want to walk away for free. So if you could trade him to a potential team, and you can say, all right, now 2nd round pick, 3rd round pick, 1st round pick, what are we going to get for this guy? And if nobody wants to trade with us for T. Higgins, at the end of the day, we got a really good receiver, and we're only keeping him for 1 year. We're not really tied down with it. We can spend money elsewhere still. Obviously, the flip side of that is saying, hey, the Bengals need a defensive tackle. Cheeto's out the door, right tackle. Maybe they want to bridge right tackle for a year. Guys like that. There's positions that this team need to fill. Defense was getting torn apart this season, and you still want to be a Super Bowl team. If there's a couple pieces you can bring to this team in other positions, you say, hey, we got to save that cap. You can spend that salary cap, that cap space real quickly. You let T. Higgins walk, and you're okay with it. But if you can bring a 2nd round pick in return, a 1st round pick in return, 3rd round pick in return, and say, hey, plug and play guy with team control for 4 years. The question is, if you trade T. Higgins, seen a lot of people say, let's franchise tag and trade T. Higgins. So let's go down the trade T. Higgins route. What would the Bengals possibly get in return? Be honest. Take a step back. You're not getting a first for him. I know a lot of people are optimistic, but it's not happening. There's no chance. Not in my opinion. I'll stand by that one. And here's why. If you're going to get a first for him, it's got to be a late first. And you look at teams in the late, maybe the Jaguars are maybe the last team you look at right around the Bengals. They got a little bit of cap space, not a lot, kind of tight on the cap space. They got some, but they got other guys that are throwing money. They got some guys they want to keep around. Do you want to bring another weapon for Trevor Lawrence? Or you look and say, hey, we need to work on something else. Other than that, you look and say, hey, who needs a wide receiver? I mean, Baltimore's got Zay Flowers. Now, do you bring somebody else in? Maybe Kenny Pickett. They got the George Pickett. The teams I look at and say they need a wide receiver. Possibly the Steelers, Chiefs. You ain't trading with those teams. That ain't gonna happen. Ain't no way the Bengals are trading with those teams. They're gonna run up against an AFC Championship game. No chance. Or the division. And a lot of these other teams making the playoffs, they already have a really good receiver. Maybe they have 2 really good receivers. It doesn't make sense for them to pay another receiver a bunch of money if they have other holes to fill or if they're tight against the cap. So you look and you stop and say, all right, let's look at the top 3 teams cap space wise. You got Tennessee, you got Washington, you got New England. All excellent trade partners, I think. All of them. I know the Bears got a couple of draft picks, but it really doesn't make sense for the Bears because, again, if they don't get Marvin Harrison to slip from, they'll get a Dunze, and the guy's a freaking stud. And that's what Chicago's probably thinking. It's like, we're not going to do that. We'll take a wide receiver and quarterback in the first top 10. We're going to sit pretty. Why trade away assets and then on the second round pick, not to mention? So why trade away the first round pick for something like that? And that's a lot of the story for a lot of these teams, like New England or like Washington or like Tennessee. Why would you trade away a top 10 pick for T. Higgins? I'm taking my bias away here and say real quickly, I'd rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. or Roma Dunze than T. Higgins. Why? Because first of all, they have the upside potential. I feel like, Marvin Harrison's floor is T. Higgins. Unlimited ceiling. Dunze, is it a Dunze? I think it's a Dunze. I called him a Dunze. It's a Dunze. Watch my mistake. Well, watch like 6 Washington games this year. Still remember his freaking last name. How to say it right. But you look and say, okay, those guys are out there. You got the guy that won wide receiver of the year in college football. He's out there out of LSU as well. It's like you got 3 really good receivers. So why would you give up a top 10 pick? Why would you give up a top 12, 13 pick when you think you can land this guy for T. Higgins? It doesn't make sense. And then you look and say, all right, okay, so if these teams are going to be trade partners, you're probably going to get a second round pick. Maybe a second and a fourth. Maybe a second and a third. Second and a fourth, pretty good return though. Still, you're going to get an early second round pick. And I think that's what you're going to end up seeing out of T. Higgins here. And I think that's okay. I honestly would happily take that. Take the second, take the fourth. Bengals got to hit on these later draft picks outside the first. Bengals got to hit on these draft picks in general sometimes. And you can get some good players out of the second round. Maybe get another defensive tackle early in the second round. Position that usually falls a little bit later. Maybe get another guard or something if you want to, draft for the future. Maybe get another CB. Cheeto walking the door, Mike Hilton getting older kind of situation. Draft for the future there. I'd be okay with that if a team would want to make that trade. Could you get a late first? Possibly. I don't see the team that's going to match with them. I think, Tennessee's your prime landing spot here. Chicago's really the prime landing spot, but they don't have a second round pick. And it just makes sense for them to draft another wide receiver. But you look at, Tennessee, Callahan's over there now. He knows what he has on T. Higgins. You got a young quarterback. You draft the offensive line in that first round. They got to bolster up that offensive line. So they're not going to draft a wide receiver. They're going to still need a wide receiver. You bring in T. Higgins. They got the cap space. They got the situation. It plays out. You say, let's start building this team, building some players to run this team. Arizona, kind of the same situation where you say, hey, they got, the ability to draft some other pieces. They need to fill this team. Washington, same story there. They need Washington needs a quarterback. It's like, hey, where these guys are going to first round. Let's surround them with talent. The best way we can guarantee them talent is bringing in a guy like T. Higgins. So I do think that is the return value for T. Higgins. I'm perfectly okay with that. At the end of the day, I do think looking at the way things are right now, looking at the landscape and free agency, and you say, hey, unless you're wheeling and dealing and throwing Dalton Schultz a bunch of money at tight end, for the long term, you look at the receivers, like you could get Michael Pittman. You think that's the thing with the Colts too, right? Like, why would they trade for Higgins? They kind of have like a middle round pick. They got Michael Pitt. They want a receiver. They're going to keep Pitt. So just being at Bengals, it does make the most sense right now. I don't think T. Higgins is a guy you keep on his team for the long term, but I think he's a guy, again, the projected franchise tag hit this year being $20 million. You say $20 million, it's not a big deal. Unless they are bringing in a guy. And here's, that's the thing, we're projecting that Jamar Chase contract in futures. Like, there's other guys' contracts ending. But unless you're trying to bring in other guys for a 2-3 year deal. It depends who the Bengals are targeting in the offseason. But you're not going to bring in a guy and sit him on a bench. That's the problem here. It's like, yeah, you could look at some of these offensive linemen saying they're getting older. Their contract's going to be expiring year after this. And say you break something, but you're not going to pay a guy 3 years, $40 million or something to sit the bench for a year. So you're kind of in that situation. You have to wait and see in some of these positions. And it kind of gives the Bengals a little bit of time to wait and see, really, which would be great. They might see, I think you keep one of Boyd or Higgins, and if you get rid of one or the other, then you have a chance for some of these other young guys to step up. You really have a chance to see what they're capable of. And if all of them look like they have no potential, you say, all right, maybe we have to work on Higgins. Maybe one of these other guys in the secondary, one of these other draft picks turn out. And now all of a sudden, you can afford T. Higgins for a little bit longer than you thought. I think it buys you time. I think it's a stopgap, but I'm still pro get the draft capital. The last thing you want to do is let the guy walk in free agency, though. The last thing you want to do. The Bengals have been doing that too much in the past few years, and we're seeing what happens, especially in the secondary there at the defense. Bates, Von Bell walking out the door, not getting nothing out of it. It kind of hurts you. It kind of handicaps you there. You got to stay aggressive when you're a Super Bowl contender, but you got to be kind of conservatively aggressive where you don't want to overspend and waste money and get it tied down on a player. But you know what you're getting out of T. Higgins. Nonetheless, love y'all's thoughts and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.